An eternal perspective. No matter what our circumstances in this life, we are to focus on God's grace and eternal values. Here's Gene.
When Titus came to Macedonia and probably Philippi, and Paul met him, can you imagine the reunion? Paul had been looked for him in Troas, and he probably said, Titus, where were you? Why didn't you come to Troas? I was afraid even when I got on the ship that I would be on the way to Philippi and you'd be on the way on land coming down to Troas. So they didn't have communication with each other. And so you can imagine the incredible reunion that came about when they met. And one of the things that Titus reported was simply this. Paul, I hate to tell you this, but those false apostles, they're accusing you of giving up. They're accusing you of all talk and no action. They're calling you a wimp because you weren't strong enough to come back to Corinth like you said you were going to come back. You didn't come back and face the situation. You wrote a letter. They were saying Paul gave up. He even left Ephesus. He headed off somewhere. We don't know where he went. Well, that didn't make Paul feel very good. But I think he addresses that criticism in the letter. And first of all, he said, we didn't give up because of God's grace and mercy. That motivated us to keep going in spite of the pain we were feeling and the persecution. So he says, therefore, since we have this ministry, because we were shown mercy, we do not give up. We have not given up. See, he's writing to the Corinthians, dealing with the false accusation from these false apostles. Instead, we have renounced secret and shameful things. And by the way, the words he uses here are not very subtle because they apply to the false apostles. He says, instead, we have renounced secret and shameful things. They have not. Not acting deceitfully or distorting the word of God. We are not. They are. That's the implication. But commending ourselves before God to everyone's conscience by an open display of the truth. I've been vulnerable with you and everybody and before God. So that was his first statement as to why they didn't give up. Paul was saying, how can I give up when God had such mercy on me and all the sin that I committed, even murdering Christians? Mercy and grace was a strong motivator in Paul's life. But secondly, he said, we didn't give up because we have eternal values. So he says, therefore, we do not give up. Even though our outer person is being destroyed, and by the way, that indicates the extent of the persecution, our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable eternal weight of glory. And when I read those words today, just reviewing them, it almost brought me to tears, because what Paul is saying is the momentary light affliction was his life as an apostle to the Gentiles and all that he went through. And we'll see later, he enumerates that. He just saw that as momentary in view of glory and eternity. I can't even identify with that. But that motivated the Apostle Paul. So we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary. That's life here. But what is unseen is eternal. And that's what keeps us from giving up, in spite of the persecution. Now, between these two paragraphs, Paul makes 4 statements that I think are just powerful. And these are made to the Corinthians. He said this in verses 8 to 9. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We did not give up. Secondly, we are perplexed, but not in despair. We did not give up. Thirdly, we are persecuted, but not abandoned. We have not given up, and God hasn't abandoned us. We are struck down, but not destroyed. We did not give up. We have not given up, and we will not give up, ever, in view of God's grace and eternity and eternal values. You see, this was Paul's perspective on persecution and why he was able to survive and move forward. And he did that until his dying days, when he was in prison in Rome, in a dungeon, not in his own hired house, which was his first imprisonment, where he wrote to the Philippians and to the Ephesians and to the Colossians and to Philemon. This is where he wrote his last letter to Timothy before he died, before he was martyred. And this is what he said, 2 Timothy 4:6, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time for my departure is close. I have fought the good fight. I have not given up. I have finished the race. I didn't give up. And I have kept the faith." From the moment God called me to this moment where I know I'm going home. "There is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but to all those who have loved his appearing." He's not talking about salvation. He's talking about a reward, a crown of righteousness, which is given to all believers who are faithful until the coming of Jesus Christ. We did not give up, and we're entering eternity, and that's worth it all. Reflection response question, which I think is very personal. Though Paul's challenges were far greater than most of us will face, in what specific ways should his motivation and determination apply to the average Christian, to me and to you? And I simply made this note here, and that is that we need to go back and reflect on God's grace, what God's done for us. That's what Paul did. We need to go back and focus on eternal values. What will endure? What really matters in life? And I believe even in the midst of horrible pain and suffering, those two reflections can be very significant in our lives. I remember quite a few years ago now, I was ministering in India, in Bangalore. And I had just arrived, basically, and I was staying in this huge house. It was owned by Christian leaders right in the city of this huge city of Bangalore. And the seminary and the Bible college where I'd be ministering in for the next 2 weeks was east of Bangalore, in a beautiful parcel of land. But before we went out there, I had somewhat of a tour of Bangalore and was staying overnight in this home, and it was a very difficult situation for me. I was depressed, probably from jet lag, one thing, but I was also in pain. I had some serious back issues. I couldn't get comfortable, and the bed I was sleeping in was hard and difficult, and I just couldn't find any relief from the pain. And I don't know whether this was a reality or not, but in the middle of the night, I felt like I was being attacked by Satan, because I literally experienced what seemed to be fiery darts coming at me, as we read in Ephesians 6. Maybe it was the medication, I don't know. that I had taken because I had shots before I went to get relief from pain. But I was feeling really down. And here I was getting ready to minister for 2 weeks. And one of the reasons I felt down and some of the things that were going through my mind is what I had seen going through Bangalore as we were driving through that city, and little children would come up and pound on the windows and trying to get money, and finding out that these were children that were sold by their parents into sexual perversion. Bangalore is a wicked city. So is New York and a lot of other cities, but very wicked and very evil in terms of abuse, particularly of children. And that bothered me. In fact, it literally showed up in my dreams as I thought about that and what I was going through. But it's interesting, the next morning I got up, and I still have this in my day timer, and I sat at the kitchen table in that home, and I read Philippians 4:4, and I wrote it down. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Lord, I rejoice. And I went back, and I have it here, just in the way I wrote it, 2 pages. And I started with my conversion in 1948. And thank God for my salvation. I thank God for my family, my background, my parents, my heritage. I wrote down, protecting me. I rejoice that you protected me as I was growing up. And I could go back and share with you all kinds of incidents, several instances where I could have lost my life just like that from accidents, particularly on the farm, and how God protected me. I reflected on my experiences at Moody Bible Institute and the theological clarity I got there. I wrote down in 1954 my opportunities when I was studying at Wheaton, and then in 1955 my experience at Moody Bible Institute as I began to teach. And in 1956 I married a wonderful girl who's been my companion and support for years. I wrote down my opportunities at New York University to work on my PhD, and for his protection during those days, and my experience teaching at Dallas Seminary, and my church planning experiences. And I went on and on and on. I recorded all the way up to the present time for the opportunity to be in Bangalore to minister. And I remember the encouragement that was to my soul. You know, when we're in pain, when we're depressed, when we're hurting, we lose perspective. And that's why Paul, I think, goes back and says, yeah, I had those problems. But here's why I didn't give up. God's grace. What he's done for me and my eternal perspective. That only one life will soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last.